Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're glad that you're with us. We are back in the studio today, which is my office. I love just saying studio because that makes it sound so official.
And you're the studio audience, only you're not live.
That's exactly right.
I don't know what that means.
That and the fish behind Troy. So anyway, we're glad that you're with us this morning. Thank you so much for joining us for the study of Genesis. We are in Genesis chapter 42. And Troy, do you feel like it's gotten easier in the, what has it been now? About 17, 18 weeks that we've been doing this.
Like easier how so?
I don't know. Easier just in
it's still awkward, but it's not as awkward.
That's right.
Yeah, for me anyway.
Man, I'm looking forward to having a live Bible class audience again sometime soon. But being as it may, we're still doing it online virtually for at least the next couple of weeks, Lord willing. But we are in Genesis chapter 42 today and hope that you'll get your Bible and follow along with us. We're going to start off with our Genesis review like we always do and like I always do.
Hey, I did Genesis. It last week. I did it last week.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Genesis is the book of beginnings or the book of generations. Toledad is an important word. It talks about family line, talks about genealogy, and we see that repeated over and over in the way that the Genesis writer structures the book. We know that the book of Genesis has to do with following four great events through the first 11 chapters. Those are the creation, the fall of mankind, the great global worldwide flood, and then the Tower of Babel. Beginning in Genesis chapter 12, going all the way through the end of the book, we have followed not four great events, but four great men. The first of which is Abraham, then his son Isaac, then his son Jacob, and then his son Joseph, who we're talking about today, and especially him meeting the other brothers as they come to Egypt to buy grain. There are two key verses that we've assigned for the book of Genesis for this study. The first one is Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15, where God promises that he's going to deal with the problem created by sin, the problem that created the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and the serpent would deal a blow to the seed of the woman, which is Jesus Christ, but then ultimately Jesus would deal a death blow to that serpent in Genesis 3 verse 15. He would crush his head. The other key verse, Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, which you'll find repeated again all the way through the book of Genesis, is the promise that God made to Abram or Abraham. And in that, there were four different parts to that promise. The first one was the land promise, then the people promise, then the presence or protection going with Abram and his descendants, and ultimately that God would bless all nations of the earth, that God had a plan through Abraham's seed, not that he would just establish a special people to walk here on this earth, but a spiritual people who would populate the kingdom of God. Starting here in Genesis chapter 42, I've asked Troy if he wouldn't mind to read it. It's I didn't think it was that lengthy of a reading, but it seemed like it is once you started looking at it. But we're going to read chapter 42 in class and get a good scene, a good picture of what's going on here, and then come back and make some observations about it. Take it away, Troy.
Alrighty. When Jacob saw, verse 1, when Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die." So Joseph's 10 brothers went to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers, recognized him, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said to him, "No, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies." But he said to them, "No, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said, "Your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. And in this manner you shall be tested by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here." Send one of you and let him bring your brother. You shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested, to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." So he put them all together in prison 3 days. Then Joseph said to them the third day, "Do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they did so. Then they said to one another, "We are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us." And Reuben answered them, saying, "Did I not speak to you, saying, 'Do not sin against the boy,' and you would not listen? Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us." But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. And thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was in the mouth of his sack. So he said to his brothers, "My money has been restored, and there it is in my sack." And then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, "What is this that God has done to us?" Then they went to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan, and told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man who is Lord of the land spoke roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. But we said to them, 'We are honest men, we are not spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan.' And then the man, the lord of the country, said to us, 'By this I know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me. Take food for the famine of your households and be gone, and bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest men, and I will grant your brother to you, and you may trade in the land.' And then it happened, as they emptied their sacks, that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And you want to take Benjamin. All these things are against me." Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, "Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." But he said, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. And if any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave."
Thank you for reading that, Troy.
Yeah.
And you look at Genesis chapter 42, and this is not quite the family reunion that we might have picked for this occasion. In a seemingly kind of anticlimactic and quiet way, those dreams that Joseph had all the way back from Genesis chapter 37 now come to pass, and the promises of God are fulfilled without seemingly the angels singing and going, "Oh, this is everything you've been waiting for, Joseph." It just happens in kind of a passing interest there in verse 6 that those promises are fulfilled. And yet we understand that there's a reconciliation process that's going to happen, and a assessing of the character of these brothers before that happens, and that's yet fully to be dealt with in this chapter. Also, we get a picture here in Genesis 42, just on the outset, of these men and their guilty consciences, and that's really kind of the catalyst for propelling this narrative forward. The only thing Joseph does is he looks at them and then makes a blanket accusation. "Well, you're spies." Next thing you know, these guys have all this guilt that's coming up to the surface, but we'll deal with that here in just a moment. Yeah. This chapter, Troy, butts up against the end of 41:57, where it might have just been said they lived happily ever after, the end. But what we're interested in is tying up this loose threads, this narrative of bringing all the sons of Israel back together, the children of promise, and the string of Joseph's unfulfilled dreams. How does chapter 42 begin?
All right, so it picks up, like you said, at the end of 41, and Jacob learns, or he learns, according to ESV, correct? That's okay.
Yes.
He learns, or he saw, that what everyone else knew, that there was grain, or Hebrew word for corn in Egypt. And 57, it says all the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't news to Jacob, and it's not news to his son. And then he gets on to his sons for just sitting around looking at each other, not doing anything about their people starving. But the sons had to have known. If Jacob knew, the sons knew.
Right.
And then you think about it, there were undoubtedly a lot of people associated with Jacob's household who were hungry as well, and they were in a live or die situation. I mean, they had livestock and they had people to feed. Not just you think about it, Joseph's sons and him, and but a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely. And looking at the fact that it wasn't just Egypt that God was interested in saving. The entire earth was coming to Egypt because there was no food in this. God, imagine what a serious famine that is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it gets kind of dry down here in South Texas or North Texas or East or just in Texas. And there's now a sense that all of the earth is in this dire situation, but it's not just Jacob and his family that are not just Egypt that God is interested in, but he's interested in all the earth and coming to this leader, this man that he's put in this position. Who does Jacob send to buy grain, and who doesn't go with them?
He sends 10 out of the 11 remaining sons. Benjamin doesn't go, and Jacob said, lest some or calamity or trouble befall him, and why might Jacob have kept him back? Well, he's the only son left from Rachel. And again, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Benjamin's not the youngest son, but Joseph was the favorite. I mean, Benjamin was the youngest, but Joseph was the favorite, and so Benjamin stays consolation prize. And you can say Benjamin knew that he wasn't the favorite when Joseph was around. But they Jacob lets his brothers know, Benjamin right now is the most important one. Y'all go into this possibly dangerous situation. Yeah,
he's kind of become the favorite by default, I think, just because Joseph is dead, and now Benjamin is the one that's the default favorite son of the favorite wife. Do you suppose, and again, this is all speculation, do you suppose he might have suspected what happened to Joseph?
Yeah, I don't know if he did, but I can see why someone might think that. And at the end of the chapter, when he says, "Y'all have caused me a lot of trouble," that there's a little hint there too, possibly.
Right.
So he does seem like he's got some idea in the back of his head about that.
All right. So Israel, the children of Israel, sons of Israel, the 10 of the 11 that are remaining, now come before Joseph, and Joseph, we see, doesn't treat them very kindly.
No.
He treats them harshly. How long approximately do you suppose it's been since they've seen him?
Approximately,
okay. Yeah.
I have 22 years.
Okay.
No, well, around 22 years, because how old was he when he started serving Pharaoh? He was 30.
Right.
So how long has it been?
He was 17 years old when he was sold into slavery.
Possibly, yeah. So, I mean, he was 17 when he told on his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So at least, 17. But then he'll tell them later on in 45, chapter 45, verse 6, the good times have been, gone on for 5 years. The famine has been going on for 2 years. But, the traveling back and forth. So, I don't know, 22, that's where I'm getting 22 years. I'm just kind of pulling that out.
It's been now a matter of a decade and a half at least, maybe two.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Going through this, and people can change a lot in a matter of years. It's amazing to me just watching my kids grow up, in the last 10 years for my oldest, and how much they change. Can you imagine how much Joseph changed as far as his look and his appearance goes, but then realizing that his brothers weren't expecting to see him either.
Yeah, and he's dressed as an Egyptian.
That's right. They weren't expecting that, he was going to be an Egyptian either.
Yeah.
So.
They wouldn't recognize, but he recognized them.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Exactly. Well, and you tend not to forget those faces, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, when you're in a hole.
And can you imagine him thinking about it a whole lot over the course of his life? So Joseph, they go and they stand before him, but then, again, notice that verse 6, Joseph was governor over all the land. It was he who sold all the people the land. Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Again, all the way down to... let's see, verse 9. Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamed about them and said to them, "Your spies." Joseph has those men who come, and the fulfillment of Genesis 37 verse 7 is now fulfilled. Again, without any kind of pomp, without any circumstance. His brothers have now bowed down before him.
Almost all of his brothers.
Almost all of him.
So,
yeah.
I mean,
next time they come in,
kind of caught me in a way. It wasn't all of them yet, but he dreamed that all of them. So anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so what did Joseph say to him? Did he say, "Hey, all's forgiven, everything's good"?
You're spies. That's why you're here. You've come to see the nakedness or the unprotected parts of the land. And so
yeah. And how do his brothers defend themselves?
No, we're hungry. We're just coming from Canaan. We are we're hungry. You know, we come for food, and we're just your, which is interesting. We are your servants, and we're all one man's sons. We're honest men.
Yes,
that jumps out at you as well. We're honest men,
and it's almost tongue in cheek because this phrase "honest men" now comes and occurs a number of times. You may mark these in Genesis chapter 42. Look at verse 11. That's the first occurrence. We are sons of one man, as Troy mentioned. We are honest men. Jump down to verse 19. Joseph says, "If you are honest men, let one of your brother remain confined where you are in custody." You jump down at verse where they're giving the recounting to their father, down in verse 33. We told him, "Dad, we said exactly what we are. Then the man, the Lord said this, by this I'll know that you're honest men." In verse let's see, I missed one. Verse 31, we said to him, "We are honest men. We've never been spies of anything." But then right in the middle, as if to glue the whole thing together, is their admission of guilt. In truth, we are guilty men. We are guilty concerning our brother.
Which was ironic. We're honest men. No, you're not. And Joseph knew that they weren't.
Right. And what does he do with them once they confess that they're honest men?
He puts them in jail for 3 days, for a few days. And he says, all 9 of them stay in jail, right? For 2 days, and 3 days, and he brings them out, and then it kind of switches off.
Right.
Yeah.
I was a teacher before I was a preacher, and one of the things that we learned how to do was called love and logic. And one of the things that the tenets of that is that if there was a child that misbehaved in your class, you would say, "All right, I want you to come back at the end of the day, and I'm going to have a punishment for you. I'm not going to give it to you right now because I need to think about it." And if this happened first or second period, you've now got the child who's thinking about what they've done for a good 6-7 hours, and that was part of it, was the mental strain that it takes whenever you're put in timeout, or when you know that there's something bad coming and you just don't know what it is, and that's kind of a deterrent for those kids. But you think about what putting them in prison for 3 days, verse 17, did to these guys, and just really causing them to think, "Oh no, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? How are we going to take care of our father?" All these things, and how when they come out, how does it seem like that's affected them?
Oh, I mean, they've been afraid. You mentioned that it's like go in your room and wait till your father comes home.
Right.
Go in your room and think about it, and that's what you said. And they've been thinking about this, looking at each other, and okay, maybe we deserve that. That's kind of their later on when they're talking about it. This is what we deserve. I mean, we did this, and here it comes. This is going to happen, and they'll mention that again in a way in just a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah. You look at verse 18. It says, "On the third day Joseph said to them, 'Do this, and you will live, for I fear God.'" How does he amend his command to these guys who he's already accused of being slaves, and how does he deal with them and saying, "All right, here's what you need to do"? What does he do or tell them to do because he fears God?
Yeah, he kind of flips it around. Okay, y'all are all going to stay. Now he's flipping around. Just bring one. Let one brother stay. I'm going to keep one brother. Y'all go together, and the rest of you go together, and then bring back your youngest brother, so your words will be verified. He said, and if you do that, you're not going to die. If you agree to it, you won't die.
Right.
Which he just kind of keeps throwing that in there, just kind of shake him up.
Well, and the fact that he fears God ought to have been ought to be a phrase, because he's giving them a chance to prove who they say that they are, honest men. All right, if you really are honest men, I fear your God. I'm going to respect him. I'm going to respect what you've said based upon your association with him. That kind of, we are a little early for application, but here's the question. Do our words and our actions betray the God that we serve, and cause somebody to understand more of that fear and operate based upon that fear? Well, I know you and I know your character because I know that you're a godly man or you're a godly woman, and the way that you behave yourself, I'm going to put that to the test, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to prove, exactly what you say. That's Joseph. He's giving these men to say, if you really are honest men, I know that you fear God, I fear him too. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go and find your youngest brother. I want you to bring him to me. Your words will be verified. Everything will be okay. You're not going to die. Yep. How do the brothers react to this? What do they say to one another?
Well, they look at each other and okay, we're guilty. We've done evil to our brother, and here it comes back on us. And they're talking amongst themselves, but Joseph understands, and they don't know that he understands. It's interesting that he turned away, but he must have gone somewhere to cry and then come back to them. That's what Scripture said. He returned to them. And so, they're admitting right there that they are guilty, which is huge, because they claimed to be honest, and that was dishonest, and now they're being honest, and it affects Joseph mightily. Yes.
And that's an amazing thing that Joseph was able to be there whenever they made that admission of guilt. Here's now the statement that's going to set you free, and they're looking at this going, this is because we dealt so harshly and so shamefully with our brother. And you can imagine that they could still hear his cries in the statements in verse 20 and 21 and 21, 22. And Reuben saying, listen, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? And kind of maybe make himself feel a little better. But now here it is. We're all guilty. We're all responsible. And here's the reckoning. Here's the comeuppance. Here's the time when God's going to right this wrong. And Joseph looks at this, and he hears this, and he turns away and cries. Comes back, grabs Simeon, and binds him before his eyes. Simeon's the one. He's not the oldest. He's the second oldest, Reuben, Simeon, so that the oldest can still have a influence with the father, as tradition goes. And he takes him, binds him, and sends him back before their eyes. Clever thing that Joseph does, at least in my mind. If they really had such a lack of concern for Joseph as a brother, so that they could scathe their own skin and really fool their father in that way, here's Joseph saying, okay, is one of your brothers worth your life? Are you going to come back and pick him up because you care about him? Or are you just going to flee and run and say, whew, we got away from that situation, like they did when they dipped the coat of many colors in blood and took it to their father and said, hey, is this your son's? Are you really that selfish and self-serving? And here's an opportunity for Joseph to say, here's a son that I know is not the favorite of the father, but you care about him enough to come back and get him and take care of things. And sends them on their way, but how does he send them on their way? As they get home, or as they head home, what do they notice?
One of them notices that his money had been placed back into his sack, and their reaction is interesting to me. They 28, their hearts failed them once they realized that, and then they wondered, or not just wondered, but they said to one another, what in the world has God done to us? And I'm wondering why they were so scared. Wondering if the Egyptians, if they thought the Egyptians would say, which kind of really was valid, go back and claim that they were thieves, that there would be consequences with Egypt, but they were afraid. Their hearts melted or failed them.
They've now got added incentive not to go back to Egypt.
Yes. Yeah.
Here's even one more reason for you not to go back and pick up Simeon. You know, if you really are honest men, what are you going to do with this situation, this now moral conundrum that you're found in? You don't know where the money came from. You don't know how it got there. But are you honest men, and are you going to deal with this situation, or are you going to, well, like the old song says, go on, take the money and run? They get back to Jacob. What do they report to Jacob? How do they handle that?
All things. They reported all things, and then they kind of go through the process that they went through, and again they in front of their dad they tell him, and we told the Pharaoh that we were honest men, and again you wonder, okay, did Jacob know that? But then he gets on to them, it seems like. But his response to them, you've bereaved me, Joseph is dead, Simeon is dead in his mind, and now you want to take Benjamin. And then he doesn't blame God at that point, but he says, all things are against me. And there it is. There it is. You know, Reuben makes a dumb statement too. I don't know if, we're not going to land on that necessarily, but Reuben says, kill my sons if I do not bring Simeon back to you. So he's saying, if Simeon dies, I want you to kill your grandsons as well. I mean, that's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, that's here. I'm going to offer my kids' lives for ransom.
And Jacob, we wonder, well, Jacob didn't accept that because he would be killing his grandsons.
Right.
I mean, that may not be why. I mean, he didn't want calamity to befall Benjamin.
Right. What's the tone of Jacob throughout this? You see that all the way back from, I guess, the last time that we saw Jacob, whenever they had dipped the coat of many colors in the blood and gave it to him, that he refused to be comforted, and his sons and his daughters rose up and said, not to undermine his grief, but come on, Dad, it's time to move on. And he refused to be comforted, and he knew that there was going to be, or he knew that there was a prison almost that he was in, and he just he said, I'm going to go down into the grave for my son in mourning. That's chapter 37, verse 35. And thus his father wept for him. But here, now a number of years later, 13 to 20, depending on how you reckon it, here's Jacob that seemingly is still in this negative, angry, kind of all things are against me mindset, both at the beginning of this, but then that's amplified by the things that happened to him after Simeon is bound and after sons come back and didn't really have a positive experience in Egypt. Jacob, it's interesting when you think about his mindset, being a father that's grieving and just really couldn't find a way to move on past, the death of his son Joseph. Not, again, that you can encourage that, not that there's anything that you can force that along, but the negativity, the overall negativity is really, really affected his mindset in the way that he's behaving here in this chapter and in going forward when the brothers have to go back to Egypt. Yep. That's chapter 42. Troy, what are some things that you've noticed as far as application goes as we finish up this morning?
Joseph, again, a couple of times it's mentioned, we are honest men. So they're not admitting to Joseph that they aren't honest men necessarily, but in verse 21, we are truly guilty of being dishonest or concerning our brother. And so can we apply that to us? I believe so. I have in my notes that I put down 1 John 1, 8 and 9. If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth isn't in us. And so they were saying, no, we're honest men. We have no sin. Well, the truth was not in them. But if we confess our sins, verse 9 of 1 John 1, he's faithful and just to forgive our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So Joseph's brothers literally came face to face with their sins, and then they admitted that they had done wrong. And I believe wholeheartedly, once we face our sins, we honestly face them, acknowledge them, take ownership for them, then we can go through the process of forgiveness. But if we don't face those sins and confess them, yeah, we're just in a state of being in trouble according to in trouble as far as our relationship with God is concerned. And so that's one of the lessons that I get. And I'm not going to go do any more. That's up to
No,
you.
and that's it. And let me do a little bit more on that.
Yeah.
There's a sense in which we're full of ourselves, and when we've feel like we've got everything all put together, that we're not going to admit that there's anything wrong. It was only until these men were really upon the humble reliance, or they were humble themselves and were under the reliance of the goodness of this king of Egypt, this second in command of Egypt, that they began to really confront themselves, or be confronted with the seriousness of what they'd done to their brother Joseph. Jesus would say in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And looking at ourselves and thinking, sometimes we feel like we've got everything put together, and then we're going to go down to Egypt and everything's going to be fine, and we're going to buy grain, and then realizing and facing the ghosts of the past, the skeletons in the closet, the things that we've done, that we look at ourselves and say, I wish I hadn't done that. I would have, if I had to go back again and make a change. I recognize how wicked what I did was. Then there's a humble attitude and a confession of what these men made, which we are truly guilty concerning the blood of our brother. That's the humility and the poverty of spirit that Jesus talks about, and looking at themselves and saying, we can't fix this on our own. We need the grace and the goodness, and we are desperate for it. Otherwise, we're going to get exactly what we deserve. We're going to get the wrath that's coming down upon us, even though up until this point we've claimed that we're honest men. We've done what's right. And just like Troy said, when we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us.
And I'm sorry, I'll just add a little bit to that. Just like Joseph knew that they were lying to him, God knows when we're not being truthful as far as ourselves are concerned.
The word confession, homologeo, to speak the same thing.
Wow, you pull out of your wow.
Yeah, that's
good job.
Well, it's an easy one to remember. Homo,
for
which
you,
is
okay.
Homo is same, and logeo
wow.
is to speak. To speak the same thing that God already knows. God knows what we've done. The best thing that we can do, and the only thing that we can do that's going to grant, that's going to not merit, but that's going to cause him to look at us and forgive us, is to humble ourselves and say, God, I made this mess, and I can't do anything with it. I can't clean it up. And that's the way it is. I love the fact that Joseph's plan is so clever that he desires to see if his time has really changed his brothers and their attitude. By choosing the second favorite son, Benjamin, now by the favorite wife, Rachel, to be brought to Egypt, he has a chance to see, number one, is Benjamin still alive? It could be that their now jealousy and anger towards Joseph and towards the sons of Rachel filtered off. Is Benjamin still alive? Number two, if they've mistreated him, or if they're going to look for an excuse to do evil to him. But number three, if they really love their brother Simeon enough in order to trade for him. There's a wisdom here in Joseph's plan, and looking at the way that he wanted to see if time had really changed his brothers, or if their attitude towards him had changed and they regretted what they did. It wasn't the fact that his brothers came and bowed down to him, and I kind of wonder what the result would be if he just said, hey guys, guess what? Yeah. It's me, it's Joseph. If all of a sudden he's the favorite again, all of a sudden there's his brothers understand that he's now second in command in Egypt, if their attitude would be, well, let's hate him even more because he survived everything that we put him through, and instead Joseph has an opportunity through time and through his craftiness, if we can say it like that, to really lance the bubble of these men's pride, and to see the humility and bring them down to a low place where they are fully dependent upon his grace and his mercy before they make changes. What else do you notice, Troy?
That, Jacob's attitude toward his brothers, toward his sons, doesn't seem to waver, which is interesting in the sense that they're still there. They're still with him. Yeah, you lost Joseph. Yes, and now Benjamin is your brother, but I won't let him. But he's still, in a way, making them realize y'all are not the most important people in my life. And that's so sad. As far as I see that, it's just so sad for them, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And Jacob being in that bad place and the difficulty. How many times does he mention God in this chapter? You see, you look at the very beginning, go back down to buy grain in Egypt, and then he says, I'm not going to send Benjamin lest some calamity befalls him. At the very end, all things are against me. Yeah. It doesn't say, I know that God is going to take care of us. I know that I'm going to trust in his promises. And again, there's a sense in which this narrative, this account of Joseph coming and confronting his brothers coming and him confronting them, is also to snap and to bring Jacob out of his depression and his really the storm clouds over his head. And it's not God's will, honestly, that we remain in this really negative, overwhelming mindset to where we feel like nothing good can happen, and where our words betray us to the point where we say that I'm just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. When we look at the promises of God, especially to this family back in Genesis 12, 1-3, and again repeated all throughout the book of Genesis, our key verses, Jacob had every reason to understand that God's blessing would come to him. You go back a couple generations to his father Abraham. Abraham was told by God in Genesis 22 to sacrifice his son, his only son, the son who he loved, Isaac. And Abraham didn't immediately get this storm cloud over his head and begin to think, all things are against me. I can't believe that God asked me. Abraham was willing to do what God ultimately did through Jesus. But we also know that Abraham trusted in God enough that he was going to bring about his promise one way or another. And that's exactly what we find here in Genesis 42, that God is slowly but surely fulfilling that promise, that he's going to not only bless the family of Abraham, but also to bless all nations of the earth, which he's doing here through Joseph, and he's accomplishing his task. It's a wonderful thing, and if you follow the theology all the way through this chapter, even though Jacob is in this bad place, God is still working, and his promise is still coming to pass. Anything else you can think of, Troy, that we can add to this before we close it out?
Not at the moment.
All right.
I'll do another video if I think of something else.
Very good. Genesis 42b. There
yes.
we
go. Point 2.
Very good. We're glad that you've joined us today. Thank you once again, and hope that you have a wonderful Lord's Day and that you're blessed in your life and your service. Thank you.